Hey everybody, I'm Bruce Montgomery and this is my colleague Tracey Priest, and we are with the Road to Retail. Today we're going to talk about what goes on now that you have nailed your meeting with the key retailer. Before we get into that, just to give you a little bit of background, Tracey and I have both been in the consumer packaged goods business for most of our 30-year careers, doing sales, marketing, business development, working with brokers, building networks, etc. We also took advantage of our long time in the industry to interview buyers this spring representing 12 of the largest retailers in food, drug, mass clubs. So these comments incorporate both what Tracey and I have learned in firsthand experience and also the comments of these professional men and women who were kind enough to lend us their opinions. Okay. So you've got your meeting with one of these retailers that you've targeted. How do you prepare for this meeting? Okay, so some of the stuff's going to seem really fundamental, but the fundamentals are what kill you. So logistics, they need to be flawless. If you're going into their office, are you sure that the internet connection is going to work, or is it a really deep conference room where you'll get no signal? If you have videos, test them. Are they going to run on your system? Have you reserved a room that's big enough? Send an agenda. Many of the buyers said they like to have an agenda in advance. All the people that you bring to the meeting need to have a role. You don't need someone sitting around like a potted plant, okay? You need to understand how your category is managed, okay? If you're in there on your own and you don't have experience, you might want to consider hiring a sales agent or a broker that really knows that account, that can tell you what success is going to look like. Be concise. We heard from every single retailer, they want short presentations, they want to have a conversation, and they want to learn. Going in there with the 80-page deck, trying to knock it out in an hour is a really bad plan. Also, get into their stores, more than one, and not just the one across the street from headquarters. Try to get into some different formats, understand what's going on, so that if the buyer asks you some questions about what you've noticed in the stores, you've got answers for them. Tracey?
Yeah, no, those are great points, Bruce, and I just can't emphasize enough that short and sweet is better. And also, when you're getting into those stores, it might help to take some pictures of the sets or the category sets that you want to get into, and you may even use those in your presentation so that you show the retailer that you understand, their sets and their size of the sets and the items that they have in there. Which leads to the second thing that we wanted to talk about today, which is understanding the retailer. Before you get into that meeting, you really need to understand their one pricing strategy. Is it a high-low retailer or is it an EDLP retailer? The second thing need to know is what is their schedule. So when is their category review? When is their reset timing? And a sales agent or broker can certainly help you with that. You also need to understand what are their programs. What do they do? Ads? Do they do TPRs? When we get back to some kind of normalcy, what kind of demos do they do? What are their pet projects? So do they support Vitamin Angels as an example? So those are some things, but really do your research. And when you get into the meeting, make sure that you know the fundamentals of the retailer. How many stores do they have? What is their geography? What are their plans for growth? So know all of that. Be an avid, just professional reader of their annual report. So the more you know about the retailer, the more you will come across as knowledgeable, and that gives the buyer a great comfort level. Bruce, what do you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is try not to ask any question that with a little bit of research, preparation, or Googling that you could answer yourself. Tracey, the example Tracey gave is a good one. I cringe if someone goes in on one of my teams and asks the buyer, how many stores do you have? That's a ridiculous question. You should know that. So let's talk about which retailers to approach. This is really important because there is an order and sequence of the types of retailers you want to go to. Tracey already talked about the two key strategies, high-low or EDLP. But you might want to ask yourself a couple of things because every brand doesn't belong logically in every retailer. If you have a high-end skincare product, you might not want to try scheduling appointments with the dollar stores. It could be a bad match, both from a price point standpoint, demographic standpoint, and even an environmental standpoint. So do you match up demographically with the retailer's shopper? Can you work with the retailers you're targeting successfully? If you're a very small emerging challenger brand and you're trying to go into a giant retailer, if they even gave you a 300-400 store test, can you keep up? Can you fill those orders? Because the only thing a retailer hates more than a product that doesn't sell is one that doesn't ship. Can you meet their margin requirements? Can you meet their trade funding requirements? Are you looking for geographic concentration? If you're a brand that started in Florida, do you want to focus on retailers that have a big footprint in Florida and project from a base of strength? So those are some things to keep in mind as you work through where you want to go. Just because a retailer inquires to you about maybe coming in and talking to them about being listed, that's really exciting, but sometimes the answer is either no or not yet. Tracey?
Yeah, those are great points, Bruce. And one thing I'd add is just, again, look at geographies. What you don't want to do is if you're a Florida-based brand and you want to start in the, in the South or in the East, and then a retailer in Phoenix calls and says, hey, we want your product, it probably is not the right, fit or move for you. The other thing to really think about is your ingredients. So sometimes your products will not meet, for example, the natural channel. So Whole Foods, Sprouts have strict ingredient requirements. Natural Grocers is another one. So that may just rule you out of the natural channel if your ingredients don't meet their requirements. So something to think about. What else we want to talk about is the cost of doing business at retailers. So we're going to just cover a few of the key costs of doing business. The first one is slotting, or what we call free fill, which is a free case per store. So we definitely coach our clients that don't think that because you think your product is great, that you're not going to pay some kind of slotting or free fill, because you are. What we also recommend is that you have what we call a demand plan. So that is, the retailer is looking for how are you going to support the brand, at the shelf in their stores. So those are things like TPRs, temporary price reductions, maybe some ads, demos. They may have special events, couponing, things like that. So definitely make sure that when you get into that meeting that you can present a demand plan for the retailer, as well as a consumer plan of how you're going to build awareness with the consumer for your brand at that specific retailer. So Bruce, what else? And then we also want to talk about pricing. So you've got to make sure that you know what your SRP is. Cost is something that is either discussed or not discussed in a meeting, but make sure that you've got your cost and that your MSRP, you know what that is, and that you've gone through the exercise to know that whatever that MSRP is, that's in cost, that you can make money at that price. Bruce, what would you add there?
Yeah, just a couple other things about pricing to keep in mind. If you're working through a distributor and you haven't had a lot of experience at retail, make sure you're properly accounting for the distributor markup and then the retailer margin, so that by the time you see the retail price reflected at the shelf, which is what your consumer is going to be staring at, you're not surprised, because those are calculations you should be able to make, provided you're getting good input from a sales agent or broker, or if you have a lot of experience with that account. The other thing, if you've made your living and really cut your teeth as a direct-to-consumer online brand at first, and now you're moving into retail, really pay close attention to the pricing on your website, and then if you're also selling through Amazon, because those tend to be the first two websites that a retailer will go look at to see if you're competing against them from a pricing standpoint. you have to be at least close, folks. Tracy, that's all I had to add there.
Yeah, and on that too, when you're talking about Amazon or pricing on your website, you also want to consider a MAP pricing policy. And what we mean by that is that is a policy that says that an online retailer cannot sell your brand below a certain price. So that's also something that you should consider. So that pretty much sums up what we wanted to share with you today. We hope that you found this information that we shared valuable. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to either Bruce or I. And our email address is road2, and that's TO retailp@gmail.com. We'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have. And thanks again for listening.